My plan this morning is to focus on Jesus' declaration that we just heard from that lectionary reading where he said, "You are the salt of the earth." And nowadays we tend to hear being called the salt of the earth person as a nice thing. It suggests to us modern folks a reliable, good sort of person. And nowadays salt itself has a sort of blandness attached to it, so being the salt of the earth isn't necessarily a big deal. It's okay. It's nice. I think that may be one reason popular hymns have us singing Jesus saying from today's reading that you are the light of the world, but rarely you are the salt of the earth. You may have noticed that songs like I am the salt of the world and this little salt of mine aren't usual Sunday fare. Though today we'll be singing a salty hymn. In order to appreciate what Jesus is getting at by calling us salt, we need to, puns intended, spice up our understanding of his message. If you will, salt needs to be peppered up a bit. And so I'm going to take Jesus' idea of salt, shake her out a bit with so many spice puns during this introduction that some may feel assaulted. Or maybe insulted, because I'm spicing this morning with so many puns. Some might get chives. Some may even think it's reckless. The pastor doesn't care a way he should about too many puns. And that might be sage advice, but I can't gingerly raise the topic. It's not that I'm a careless nut. Mega time went into this introduction. At least sesame. Right, yeah, those are the puns for a bit. But I have to warn you, the rest of the sermon still has salty language in it. Salt. Sodium chloride. A necessary spice of life. And for you scientists and teachers and smarty pants, I know salt is not technically a spice, but we're going to think of it that way this morning. We cannot think of it as bland and as ordinary to understand what Jesus means. We have to think of it as a molecule of utmost importance, a commodity that's both ubiquitous and valuable, common and needed, ordinary and extraordinary. Jesus tells us that we are the salt of the earth, and we don't get a choice. And yes, it's okay and a good thing to be a salt of the earth kind of person, as we know that term to indicate. I mean, who wouldn't like to be a salt of the earth kind of person? You know, a reliable, good sort. But see, that may be what the term has come to mean, but it's not what Jesus likely just meant by using that term. And don't get me wrong, Jesus' use of the word salt in the text likely included good and reliable, but his meaning included so much more back in his day. And we need to hear it that way too. You see, back in the first century, salt wasn't just a spice-like thing that you put in your food. Indeed, until maybe 200 years ago, salt was a much more valuable staple item of everyday human life. And I don't just mean we have to have it in our system to live, which we do. Every cell in our body contains salt. But salt had a multitude of important purposes and meanings, many of which were indispensable in Jesus' culture. Salt was used not only to flavor food, but as an essential preservative to keep precious food from spoiling. We have refrigerators now. But salt was how people preserved food for thousands of years. It's how food was kept from being corrupted by bad things, germs, and decay. Salt also had medicinal purposes as a disinfectant and salve. Even today, we still gargle with warm salt water to soothe the sore throat. Saling's a common solution in hospital IVs. Salt's also been used for centuries for sprains and earaches and things like poison ivy. And believe it or not, in Jesus' days, salt was also used as a form of currency. Roman soldiers were paid in weights of salt, and the money was called salarium, simply because the Latin word for salt is salarium. And our modern word salary comes from this. Salt as salary is also the origin of the phrase not worth his salt, meaning not worth his or her pay. Romans also put salt on lettuce and greens, and so salarium is also the root of the word we still use to describe a mix of greens. Salad. I almost said celery there. Salad. Salt was so important that wars were fought over it, and sometimes war was fought with it. Salt's a powerful destroyer of plants, and so enemies' fields were salted and laid to waste so they could do evil no more to the enemy. Flavoring, a preservative, medicine, wages, war. Salt was so important in the day-to-day life and economy of the ancient world that towns were developed around its discovery and mining and processing. Salt was an incredibly important economic commodity, so much so it was referred to as white gold. In addition to the practical and material uses I've already mentioned, salt also had mystical and symbolic uses in the ancient world. HarperCollins Dictionary notes that salt in Bible times had preservative powers that made it an absolute necessity of life and a virtual synonym for essential life-giving forces, and, not surprisingly, endowed it with religious purposes. In the ancient world, salt's power came to bear in sealing a bargain and as a sign of friendship. The Bible reflects this custom in Numbers, where God tells Aaron, "All the holy offerings that the Israelites present to the Lord I have given to you, together with your sons and daughters as a perpetual due. It is a covenant of salt forever." And in Exodus, we can find salt as a part of what goes into a formula for religious incense. We find it used in religious sacrifices too. Leviticus states, "You shall not omit from your grain offerings the salt of the covenant with your God. With all your offerings you shall offer salt." In Ezekiel, we learn newborns are rubbed with salt. And the significance of rubbing a newborn with salt is to indicate that the child will be raised to have integrity, always be truthful. We've gone on and on a bit about salt so far this morning because Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." And we need to hear salt as more than everyday food-enhancing sprinkle. We need to hear it as something very, very extraordinary. It's common and valuable. It's spicy and useful. It preserves, flavors, and solves what ails, and salt heals. Salt can sting and irritate, but mostly it spreads out and permeates in every human life, not only spreading in food and water, but actually soaking our body by its presence in every cell in our bodies. Science has determined that salt is essential in our nerve synapses and digestion. Salt is one heck of a useful ingredient in life. In a booklet put out by a salt company in the 1920s, the list of uses included keeping the colors bright on boiled vegetables, making ice cream freeze, whipping cream rapidly, getting more heat out of boiled water, removing rust, sealing cracks, removing spots on clothes, putting out grease fires, killing poison ivy, and treating sprains, sore throats, and earaches. The salt industry goes still further, claiming 14,000 different uses for this now underappreciated substance. And this week I read in both the local paper and the New York Times how valuable salt on the road has been in this freezing weather and a concern about its shortage. So yes, salt has been and is good, reliable stuff, but it's so much more. Jesus' statement, "You are the salt of the earth," is a declaration about us being of great value. And in the text, he means you as us, the church. You is not singular, but plural in the text. It's not a compliment to us as a single being. It's a statement to Jesus' followers to function as a corporate whole, as salt of the earth. We, the followers of Jesus, the church, is whom Jesus is talking about serving as salt on the earth. Again, this is not an optional purpose. You are the salt of the earth is a declaration by Jesus, not a request. As a corporate body, if we follow Jesus, we are necessarily required to be salt of the earth. We've got to understand this. And the salt that Jesus references is valuable, permeating, enhancing, and essential workhorse of the mineral world. That's what we are to be like. We're not gold, a mostly pretty ornamental mineral. We are instead salt, an essential, useful to Christ mineral. We need to be healing. We need to be affecting all human cells. We even need to be the salt of the earth so that evil cannot grow, so that we lay waste to that which is ungodly, not violent, but by our mere salty presence that keeps at bay the weeds of violence and oppression. We need to be preservatives of Jesus' loving way by fighting against corruption, by the germs of apathy and inaction, greed and ignorance, arrogance and hate. We need to add flavors to lives dulled by seasons of despair and poverty, of brutality and abuse. Church must be like salt, the essential element of life. We must provide the saline solution of love to the aching, ill body of humanity. And we need to be irritants too. Irritating for justice and righteousness, for care and compassion in our community, until there really truly is, as our secular nation dreams, liberty and justice for all. So that the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are not pipe dreams of the poor and the downtrodden, but living realities in their lives and everyone else's life. We need to dissipate all about the world with a salting of love in the river of life so it spreads and it reaches all, so that the molecules of Christ shall permeate the world and every human being. And how do we do this? This preserving, this healing, this flavoring. How do we become salty and useful in the way that makes us valuable, extraordinary salt of the earth that Jesus meant us to be? Jesus simplified the way for us. He taught the greatest commandments are love God and love neighbor. He taught us to do to others as we want done to us. And this means, as Jesus also made clear in his teachings, that even our enemies must be loved. And then, as I was working on this sermon, putting it together, I got a divine gift from Laura, a poem by Edwin Mark. Here's the poem, Outwitted. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. I gotta read that again. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I, we had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. And when I first read that, I thought this poem sums up the whole meaning of Jesus' declaration that you are the salt of the earth. Jesus' way is about God as love, and our loving love, and our being love. And the love we must be is so powerful and extraordinary that, like salt in Jesus' day, it flavors and heals and enhances everyone's lives, even our enemies. So that when they shut us out as heretic, rebel, thing to flout, then love and we must have the wit to win, salting lives with love despite anyone's sins. We are the salt of the earth, and we have no choice as church. That's the truth, and that's also good news. Amen.